Hey all, how's it going? It's Nick here. So different kind of video today. So today we're talking about sourdough bread. So, a few weeks ago went to the store, could not find yeast. People seem to be stockpiling it. I like sourdough bread. I tried making it many years ago without success, but thought I would try it again. So what I have here is my starter. Okay, the starter is really easy to make. It's really just water and flour, right? You get a whole wheat flour worked well for me. It's got natural yeast on it, so you can culture that, but it takes about a week. Okay, so I'll do a separate video on that maybe. But here's my starter. I took it out of the fridge this morning, drained out all but about a cup of it, and then added 3/4 cup whole wheat flour, almost a cup of very hot water, and it's turned into this very thick, almost batter-like material. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to I mix that all up, and I'm just going to scrape off the edges of it, clean inside, right? I'm going to put the cover on this. I'm not going to screw it down. Okay, I'm just putting it on there loosely. So we'll come back and we'll check this in a few hours. Now what should happen is this should start to foam up and get bubbly and very soft and light as it rises over the next several hours. When that happens, I'm going to take another cup of this, put it back in the refrigerator, and let that sit as my base starter. The other cup I'm going to take, and I'm going to turn that into sourdough bread. We'll mix up some dough, knead it really well, put it into a loaf, let it rise twice, bake it. We should have some good bread. So I'm just going to let this sit here for a few hours. We'll check back on it later on today. All right, so just a quick look here. So when I started this morning at 7:30, that was 4 hours ago, we were sitting right here, and you can see this has risen up. And if you look inside, there's bubbles, and it's all foamy, and that's a pretty light liquid. So yeah, so this is doing well. So another few hours, I will go ahead and I'll separate it into another set of starter, and the rest I'll put into a bread dough, and we'll mix that up later on this afternoon. Alright, so let's see what we got here. So I have my sourdough starter, and that is nice and foamy. It's grown quite a bit in volume, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this and I'm going to mix it down, right, because there's mostly a lot of air in here. So I'll stir it up really well. Until it comes back down to the volume that it started with, and it's got lots of bubble action going on and all kinds of good things, and it's still a fairly loose batter, which is good. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to actually measure out some of this. So I'm going to measure out a cup that I'm going to use for making bread. Alright, so there's about a cup of my starter, and the rest of this I've probably got a reasonable amount left in here to feed and turn into the next batch of starter. So I'm going to feed that right now. And I like using whole wheat flour. It seems to, I don't know, maybe it has more wild yeast to it. I don't know, but it seems to work well for me. And I keep my whole wheat flour in the freezer because it's got, I think, more oils in it or something, so it can go rancid after a while. So I don't know, I freeze it. Maybe it doesn't do anything, but that's what I do. Now the recipes I found for this say to use a cup of flour and about half a cup of water. To me, that's making a really thick batter, so I'm going to do 3/4 cup of flour and then almost a cup of water and a little more. That should be good. Clean off the threads. And then I'm just going to put the lid on here. I'm going to screw it on a little bit, but I'm not going to torque it down. That goes back in the fridge. And that'll sit there till next week. Alright, we're ready to make our batter. I use a wooden bowl, and I'm going to dump my starter into here. And mostly I'm going to do this by hand, but when I start off it's going to be a very wet dough, so I'm going to use my spoon for the first few minutes. Alright, so what are we going to mix in here? We're going to mix flour and salt. I'm going to put these together separately. And I'm going to do about 3 cups of flour. I'm going to end up doing a lot more than that. But to start, we'll just do some there, and then I'm going to put some out here. And we'll come back to this as needed. Alright, now I want 2 teaspoons salt, and salt is something that I am going to measure pretty exactly, because the amount of salt goes into the chemistry of the whole thing. You're trying to not just modulate the flavor of the bread, but you're also tinkering around with the growth rate of the yeast. And the salt will cut down that growth rate. But too much salt will cut it too far, and it'll make your bread salty. So we want that to be pretty carefully controlled. And I'm just going to mix this together as the dry ingredients. And we'll be adding more flour in a bit. Not totally. Alright, so that's going to get mixed more as we need and such, but that's, you know, a good starting approximation. Alright, so we also need 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And I think that one, the measurements aren't as super critical. So I'll measure it out anyway. But this is just, you know, adding some fat to it so that it doesn't dry out as soon as it hits the air. And so now I've got this, and this is going to be really wet to begin with. I'm just trying to get it together enough to get my hands in there and start kneading it. But yeah, and we need a cup of hot water. I'm gonna make this so hot that it's actually kind of painful to keep my fingers in there. So we'll add that in. And now we'll mix this all together. Alright, so about 3 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons salt, 2 tablespoons olive oil, cup of hot water. Mix that together. And you get this batter that is way too wet to knead, right? It really isn't holding itself together. So I'm just going to start adding some flour in here. And this is very much a by feel kind of thing. I'm not going to measure, you know, exact amounts of cups or ounces of liquid. I'm basically going to keep putting in flour until it feels right. And when you put in flour, typically the batter dough will turn dry for a little bit. But the more you mix it, the wetter it will get. See, right now I'm getting some cohesion, but as I mix it a little more, it starts to turn more into this kind of flat, hard to work with mass. So in goes more flour. And we'll mix that up. Alright, so now it's holding itself together. That looks like something I could need, but let's keep mixing it. And as it absorbs the flour, let's see if it goes back to being too sticky. And yeah, see, now it's sticking to the sides. It's becoming a very kind of sticky batter. So I'm going to get more flour here. I think that's going to be enough. So I'm way outside the standard recipe now, which says 2 3/4 cups flour. I'm probably into about my 5th, maybe heading towards my 6th cup. That's okay. We're doing this by feel. Okay, so now I'm getting a lot of resistance. This is starting to feel good. Got a feeling I probably got too much flour on my pan here. I'm not going to put that back in the flour container, but I don't want to have to deal with it in the pan. Okay, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to dump it out onto my kneading surface. I'm going to fill this with water because I'm going to reuse that bowl. I'll partially fill it. Alright, and now I'm just going to go to town and start kneading this batter. Alright, so how do we do this? Well, it may stick a lot at first. That's okay. At first, I'm just really mixing. I'm just trying to get enough flour incorporated into this so that it feels like bread dough as opposed to something sticky that should be handled by a mixer instead of hands. But the way I'm incorporating the flour is I'm kneading the dough, right? And this is what I'll ultimately be doing for about 10 or 15 minutes. And it's a process of stretching the strands of gluten. At least this is, what I learned from reading books years ago about this. So I'm pushing down, which stretches the dough out, and then I fold it over, and I turn it 90 degrees. Push down, fold it over, turn 90 degrees, and I just keep doing that. Alright, so this is starting to feel like a pretty good dough. If I poke it, it doesn't bounce back too much. When it's well kneaded, it should have, a lot of resiliency. If you poke it, it should spring back. When it's risen and you poke it, the place you poke it stays poked. Right? That's how you know that it's at a good point. It's done risen, done rising, done risen. Right? But when you're kneading it and you're trying to get it to the point where you're ready to set it out to rise, you'd like it to be a very firm dough. You'd like it to be one that you poke and it springs. Different surface, but this one has a good camera angle, so I'm reaching a little, and this is feeling nice and firm. I'm pretty happy with that. And so the plan is I'm going to coat this with oil, put it in a bowl, cover it with a slightly damp towel, and leave it overnight to rise. And in the morning, it should be larger, should be risen. At that point, I will punch it down, knead it for a minute, shape it into the loaf I want, which will be, you know, pretty much like this shape, just a round loaf, and I'll leave it to do a second rising. First rising is going to go overnight. Second rising will be typically a few hours. But I'm going to cook this after classes tomorrow. So probably about 3 in the afternoon. So if I punch it down in the morning, that'll actually give it a few hours for a second rising. So that should make a nice fluffy loaf. And I kind of feel like I could add more flour to this, but I don't want to overdo it. I'm still figuring it out. This is a pretty springy dough. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Let me go ahead and put it in my bowl. Alright, so I have my bowl, which has been miraculously cleaned. And I'm going to take my dough, pop it in there, and I'm going to coat it with olive oil. Olive oil makes everything better. So pretty generous coating, and I'm going to get my hands in there and cover it. I'm going to lift it up, cover the bottom. And this is, you know, partially so it doesn't stick to the bowl too badly, but it's mainly on top so it doesn't dry out as much as it might. So we got good coating of olive oil up there. And I'm just going to put it in the bowl here. And then I'm going to cover it with a slightly damp towel. So this is one of these COVID-19 side effects. I stopped using paper towels for the most part, and I use cloth. So I got some cloth napkins. Now I always knew that using paper towels as napkins was wasteful. But when this whole pandemic started, couldn't find paper towels at the store. All paper products were sort of being stockpiled by people. So I decided, well, you know, I should probably not be filling up the landfill with used dead trees. So yeah, you have to wash napkins. That's got its own ecological footprint, but seems somehow a little less wasteful. So I'm going to dry this out. I don't want this dripping. Okay, but it's nice and wet just to sort of trap in some moisture, give my yeast a nice warm environment. And that's it. I'm just going to leave this on the counter where we'll be unperturbed overnight, and we'll take a look at it in the morning. Right, last look at what it is right now. It should be much larger and filling in the bowl by morning, so we'll check back in with that in a few hours. Hey, good morning. All right, let's see what we got. All right, so I raised my dough in the oven. The oven is off, right? Don't do this if there's a chance someone might preheat the oven. Not a problem here. Here's what the dough came out like, right? So nice and risen. I don't even need to test this, right? But if I poke it, it stays poked, right? That's a good sign that it's well risen. It's ready to go through the second kneading. So punch it down, okay? You punch it, it releases the air, and then I'm just gonna knead it a little bit. Okay, now it's, you know, it was covered in olive oil. It's not very sticky right now. So I'm just kneading it down and basically taking the major air portions out of it and turning it back into that really firm dough. And I'm only going to knead it for, you know, about a minute. It's really just kind of getting it back to where we started. And now I'm going to shape it, right? And I'm just going to do a loaf like that. I'm going to kind of, you know, pinch the bottom a little bit just to kind of seal up where I made that last fold. And this is pretty much it, okay? So I'm going to put a little more olive oil on here. I'm going to put some on the bowl as well. So just coating that, coating the bottom of the bowl, coating the bottom of the bread. Just, you know, it doesn't have to be like saturated. It's just giving it a little additional protection against drying out. And, you know, there's the shape of my loaf. I'm going to put it in here, and I'm going to recover it, put it back in a draft-free place, which for me is the oven. And I'm just going to leave it there for a few hours. So it's 9 o'clock right now, so we're 25 and a half hours since I started this yesterday morning. And I'll probably leave it here until I'm done teaching at about 3. And at 3 I'll go ahead and bake it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out of here in a few hours. I'm going to put it on a baking pan, and then I'm going to glaze it. And I'm going to do an egg white and water glaze with this. Now, different glazes give you different types of crust. If I do a melted butter, it'll come out very soft, like sort of traditional white bread, or, you know, like hot dog bun. If I do just straight water, it'll come out kind of crunchy. So an egg white and water glaze will come out pretty hearty, kind of chewy. It's a nice crust for a sourdough bread, I think. So I'll take it out of here in a couple of hours, and I'll move it to a pan, okay, and then I'll start glazing it. And I'll cut some patterns in the top just to make it look fancy. And I'll glaze it a few times, and probably about 3 o'clock. So 6 hours from now, I'll go ahead and bake it. And then we should have some bread. All right, so we'll see how that goes. Hey, all right, we are back. It is 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so almost 3:30. So we are a good 32 hours from where we started yesterday morning at 7:30. Just for reference, you know, here's the sourdough starter that I had put back in yesterday, and it's bubbling, right? It's got some bubbles in there, so that's gonna sit in the fridge all week. Now, because it's refrigerated, it's not gonna be too active, so it can go for a week without, you know, blowing past the top. I'm going to take out my bread dough, which has been doing its second rising, and if I look at that, that's nice and risen now, okay? That's all ready to cook. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna turn on the oven to 400 degrees. That's our temperature. I'm going to use just some plain old spray-on Pam. You know, I used to butter the pan, and I used to flour it, and I got really good at flouring pans and all kinds of stuff. And my bread would still stick sometimes. So I use the spray-on stuff. It's not authentic maybe, but it works. Okay, I'm going to very carefully take my dough out of my bowl and put it onto my pan. And I'm doing this carefully because I don't want to punch it down. I don't want to collapse it. So I'm just going to kind of gently ease it off. This is a living thing. It's filled with, you know, I'm guessing millions of yeast doing their thing. And that's part of the fun of making bread, is you're dealing with this, you know, very complex system. So I'm just going to transfer that onto my pan, and I'm going to kind of, you know, push it up a little bit. Alright, and I'll put the bowl aside. Now, I'm going to do a couple of odd things here. First of all, I'm going to just put a little artwork on the top, right? I'm just going to cut kind of a angled swoopy thing here. It doesn't mean anything. It's just, you know, slightly artistic. But this will spread as it bakes, and it'll look kind of cool. Maybe I'll do one going across. Alright, so that's it for my swoopy artistic component. Now I'm going to put a glaze on here. I like doing an egg white glaze. I like the kind of crust I get from that. You can glaze with all kinds of things, or not at all. As I said before, if you use melted butter, you'll get a very soft crust. If you use water, you'll get a crunchier crust. I'm going to use egg white mixed with a little cold water. And egg white is going to give me a chewy texture, which I like, especially for sourdough. So there's my egg white. I'm going to do cold water. I don't actually know that it has to be cold, but I always do it cold. And just a little bit, you know, maybe a tablespoon. That was pretty precise, right? I'll mix it up. Kind of like if you're making an omelet. This is like the world's smallest omelet, though. Alright, if you have a pastry brush, go get your pastry brush. I do not have a pastry brush, but I have a paper towel, so I'm just going to fold it over a few times, and I'm just going to rip up some coarse bristles like this. I'm going to shape this one more time, and I'm just going to brush the top with this egg white glaze. And I'm going to try to cover it. This is not super duper precise either. It's really just kind of going to affect the color of it and the texture of the crust. But you know, the crust is important. And I'm coming in on these patterns that I cut and getting the edges of that. And it's hard to overdo the glaze, right? You don't want a lot of it piled up on the pan because it'll cook and it might, you know, turn brown and make smoke and stuff. But you know, we're just putting on a glaze, and we're going to do this again before we pop it in the oven. We're going to do it 1 or 2 times while it's cooking. So I'll take my very high performance, high-end pastry brush and leave it there. Alright, so that's ready to go. So the oven is set to 400 degrees. And I have this pan that was, you know, in the bottom of the oven. I guess it's a broiling rack or something. I think if you do meat, you do something with this to catch juices maybe. I don't know. But I'm going to use this. I'm going to fill it with water and put it on the lower shelf of my oven. So down here, bottom shelf, I'm going to put this pan. I'm going to fill it with water. The oven's at 400, so it's going to, you know, make steam. And the bread I'm going to put up here. This is actually on the 3rd of 5 shelves, so it's right about in the middle. So I'll get that going. Well, that's going to make a really moist environment. I don't know what that's for, but I like it. I've never done this before I started making sourdough, but I've read about it. That's exciting, that's okay. And you know, some recipes I've read for French bread, they have these really elaborate procedures where you bake for 5 minutes and then you lower the temperature and you bake for 3 minutes and then you spritz it with water and you turn up the temperature and you wait 7.5 minutes and then you rotate the pan 180 degrees and you put in boiling water in a pan underneath and all this stuff. And it all seems kind of weird, you know, but one of the best breads I ever made, I ended up doing that because I was baking a loaf of French bread in a toaster oven. A friend whose oven wasn't working, and I ended up, you know, opening it and scraping the bottom at one point and changing the pan height because it was touching the heating elements on top and all kinds of weird things. And there was fantastic bread. The one that came out at the end was amazing. So sometimes these rituals, I think there's something to it. All right, so that light goes off when the oven's hot. But I don't mind putting bread in an oven that's not quite at temperature yet. In my mind, that gives it a little more time to rise before the yeast is killed. So I'm popping that in the oven, and I'm setting my kitchen timer to 45 minutes. And it's supposed to take, I think, 55 to 60, but I'll be keeping an eye on it, but I'll definitely start looking at it closely at about 45 minutes. So I'll come back, do a glaze in a little bit, and we'll see how it's going. Alright, it has been about 15 minutes that the bread has been in here. I'm going to pull this loaf out. It's looking pretty loafy. Going to apply some more egg white cold water glaze with my high-tech pastry brush. Again, nothing very scientific going on here. It smelled like it was doing something, so I checked the timer. It had been 15 minutes. That's probably a pretty good interval. I'll do one more glaze and another 15, and then I'll probably just let it cook till it's done. This looks like it's going to be a flatter loaf than some of my other ones, and I kind of sensed that when I took it out of the bowl. It looked like it wanted to spread out. And to me, that's saying maybe I could have used more flour. It was taking in a lot of flour when it was cooking. Alright, I'm also going to rotate this because my oven is really small and the pan blocks a lot of heat. So we'll put that back in there. We'll check in again in about another 15 minutes. Alright, one more check. It's been about a half hour. Water on the bottom is boiling. This is looking like a nice loaf. Let's do one final egg white glaze. And then I'm just going to let it go for another about 20 minutes maybe. And then I'll pull it off, tap the bottom with a butter knife, see if it sounds nice and hollow. And since this is a sort of flatter loaf than usual, although it's starting to rise more, but since it's kind of flattish, that might affect the baking time. But you know, times, measurements, temperatures, these things are all starting points. It's a very dynamic process. You have to, you know, feel what the dough is doing to decide whether to add more water or flour. You have to look at how it's baking, check how it smells, and so on to decide when it's done. So we'll let this cook for another 15 minutes or so, and then we'll see what we got. Alright, it has been a good 45 minutes now, and it is definitely smelling like bread. Let's see what we've got in here. We've still got water on the bottom. This is looking pretty glorious. We're starting to get some browning going on there. So I'm just going to take a butter knife and I'm going to do a tap test, right? So I'm just going to kind of lift this up and tap on the bottom. I'm thinking it's probably pretty close to done. It can go just a little more. I don't want it to get too cooked, right? I don't want that crust to get burnt. So I'm going to let it go for, I don't know, 2 or 3 more minutes maybe, and then take it out and call it good. Alright, I am calling this done. It's been about 15 minutes. That's a beautiful loaf right there. I'm going to go ahead and take that out. I'll leave that tray of water in there until it's cool. I'm not going to mess with boiling water. But turn the oven off and let's see what we got here. There is our loaf of sourdough bread. And alright, there you go. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it or learned something or both. Take care. Catch you later.